Okay, so technical difficulties there. But I'm going to pick up where I left off, and then I'm going to circle back around to this entire section. Quickly, though, we know that Eastern European countries that were taken over by the Soviet Union had been trying to get out of Soviet control for decades before the fall of the Soviet Union. When Gorbachev cut the military budget, one thing Gorbachev does when he takes over in 85 is the Soviets are going broke. And he says, in order to save money, I'm going to stop paying the Eastern European military bill. One thing you should know is that Russia was always kind of doing a little better financially than Eastern European countries, although many Eastern European countries had historically had better economies than Russia, so specifically Czechoslovakia and Germany, but even arguably in Budapest and in Poland, they had better economies traditionally than Russia, but because Russia was the big dog and they were the powerhouse, they always made their economy a little stronger. But at this point, they cut off military budgets, and many Eastern European countries are going to all of a sudden, their soldiers stop showing up. There used to be checkpoints. We all think of the Berlin Wall, but there were like kind of chain link fences, maybe with barbed wire, that cut the whole old Iron Curtain, Eastern Europe in half, or Europe in half. And there were checkpoints where the roads were, and the Russian soldiers or the Eastern European soldiers who were being paid by the Russians would man the checkpoints with their weapons, and you had to stop and show your paperwork before you could go in or out. They just stopped showing up for work. Why? Well, because they weren't getting paid. I'm not going to show up to work if I'm not getting paid. So all of a sudden, I remember being a kid, right? And I'm real young, I'm like 14 or something, and I don't really pay much attention, but you hear just a little bit of chatter, and there was this thing once. I can't even give you all the details, but it was like, there was people saying, there's no one manning the checkpoints in, was it Austria? On the Austrian border with Czechoslovakia, I'm not sure, but all of a sudden in 1989, they just stopped showing up for work, and people heard about it, and they would tell each other, there's no one down there. You can just cross now. And you would hear that, and all of a sudden there would be waves of people migrating from the east into the west, and this starts a domino effect where all of Eastern Europe is going to get free of the Soviet Union in like 2 years, maybe in a year. It just happens. And we'll get into the whole story. But real quickly, one thing we should know is that these Eastern European countries, they have not been doing better. There was an initial kind of burst of success, economic success, but really they're all kind of been doing poorly, and it almost rhymes with imperialism, right? When you're controlled by another country and the other country exploits you for whatever they need you for. In this case, the Soviets exploiting Eastern European countries. Your economy is going to hurt for quite some time. I mean, if you look here at Latvia, which is one of these little countries up here, is starting to do better by 2010, but this is not a economically successful area in Eastern Europe. A lot of Eastern Europeans these are the satellite state countries, or East Germany. East Germany does well, let's just say that. But Poland, Czechoslovakia does well. Hungary, Romania, a lot of these countries, these people are going to migrate into Germany, into France and the UK, or Northern Italy, looking for jobs. So there's kind of a migration that takes place here. And these countries, they were part of the Soviet Union. They weren't even satellite states. They were part of the Soviet Union. And well, they're the areas that we just saw were struggling greatly to this day. I mean, all of them, right? You can see kind of on that downward trajectory. Okay, so let's get into Poland. Let's start there. And we're going to get really modern here. And I'm going to pick up here now where I left off my last lecture when I had some technical difficulties. So Deary, my great buddy, Taft's own, Richard Deary, his dad was an Air Force pilot in Poland, okay, in the late 50s. And a Russian general shows up and expects him to speak Russian. He refuses to. So they arrest him quickly. They then deport his family. Yes, that's the Deary family. That's my great buddy, Mr. Deary. His family gets deported. They end up in Italy for 2 years before they get to America. And then, of course, he stays, right? He works at Taft High. Say hi to him next time you see him. He's a great guy. So Poland had a long history of passive resistance towards the Soviet Union. Another story from Deary, he told me that when you were told to choose the most important woman in history, you had like 2 choices, and they were both kind of communist people. And he chose Cleopatra from Egypt, and then they like suspended him from school. Like, this is kind of what it's like to live in a Soviet country, right? Yeah, it's like you have your mind made up for you, right? When they say, who's your favorite basketball team? Say the Lakers or the Lakers. Say the Lakers or the Lakers. You have no real choice. Who's your favorite sports team? Lakers and the Dodgers. Oh, well, I actually like the Knicks. Arrest him. It's one of those kind of things where they tell you that you have free choice, but then you really know that you have to choose the Lakers. Which, oh, by the way, in my country, that's how it would be. JK. Anyways, no, really, it probably would be, though. I'd be a dictator. You have to like the Lakers. They have to win too. Oh, by the way, Phoenix, take it easy on the dirty plays. I'm sorry, I gotta stop. So in Poland in 1980, there was a labor union called Solidarity that protested under the leadership of that guy, Lech Walesa. I don't know how to say his name. I'm sorry, Polish people. He ends up being jailed, but this union stays strong, and in 1988 he is released from jail, and Poland becomes the first Eastern European country to have free elections. Now remember, this is when Gorbachev's in power, and Gorbachev, he is gonna be cool with it. He's not gonna fight it. In fact, he's not gonna fight any of these movements. Gorbachev realizes that the Soviet Union is doomed. And although he believes in communism and he believes in the ideals behind the system, he just wants to give more freedom, specifically freedoms of things like different political parties or different opinions being heard, freedom of press and speech. Not full of freedom of press and speech, but some. This guy ends up being elected president in 1990, and he loses in 95, but Poland stays free.
But what do I be?
Hey, guess who knocked on my door? It's Richard Deary of Taft High School, the man I was just talking about. Mr. Deary, please say hi.
Hi, and I left just 20 years before this happened, but I fully can explain, clarify, and even spell. Remember, pronounce the name they should be. Like, for example, I can see that we've got.
How do you say that name?
Oh, you know why I like teaching.
All right. Well, that was great. Nothing like a guest appearance from my great buddy, Mr. Deary, from across the hallway. My first guest appearance other than my daughter coming up here and screaming at you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. And maybe as seniors, you'll have him too. He's a great guy. He's a great teacher. I hope my daughter gets a chance to have him. Anyways, moving on. Moving away from Poland and into Czechoslovakia, we're going to see that, we know that in 1968, the Soviets came in and they crushed a Czech rebellion, an attempted rebellion, as the Czechoslovakians were looking to form their own government free from Soviet control. And now we're going to pick up in 1989 where, look, Gorbachev has really loosened up control over the Eastern European countries. And we're going to find that 500,000 Czechs are going to meet in Prague, and they're going to demand their independence. And Gorbachev's not going to say no. He's going to just kind of say, okay. And Czechoslovakia gets its independence in 1989. They get this guy here. I can't say his name. He becomes the leader of, he was the leader of the opposition to the Soviets. And now he's president. And in 1989, Czechoslovakia has its independence. In 1993, and let's take a look here, if I may, at 1989, Czechoslovakia. They have a rebellion, and it works. You know, first it's just a protest, and then the Soviets just kind of say, okay, and the Czechs form their own government. Behind this guy right here, here is our Havel Gniezdy, I don't know. So here's a map picture of Czechoslovakia on the map. After World War I, really the entire time after World War I, Czechoslovakia was a country like this. But if you look at that name, that's why I grew up with Czechoslovakia. There's Czech, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And in 1993, they agree peacefully. The more powerful Czechs agree. They say, hey, Slovakia, you can have your own country. We'll have our own country. We're cool, man. And in 1993, the Slovaks get their own country, and the Czechs get their own country. And now we have two countries in what used to be one country that was squashed together because after World War I, they did a horrible job of creating countries. And we have the Czech Republic and Slovakia, really based on historical, ethnic, cultural stuff, the right way, the way it should be. Romania. In 1965, Romania was communist under Soviet control. A super strict communist leader named whatever, Nicol, I'm sorry, Romanians. He took over. He was super strict. He crushed all dissent with an iron fist. He had a secret police that would enforce his policies. He rationed food. He limited the amount of food and flour and bread that the people and sugar that the people could have. He bulldozed villages to make for urban expansion. Who does that? And in 1989, he ordered the killing of thousands of peaceful protesters, which they do. Hold on, let me. I have my pictures a little backwards here. What happened? Where did that picture go? Here we can actually see some of the protests where they were actually killing people. There's another picture of that. Let me move everything over. Maybe I can find that picture. It's got lost. Right, you can see they're blowing up buildings. And then after that, the military refuses to listen to him anymore. They say, no, dude, that was messed up, what you made us do, and we're not going to do it anymore. And they end up capturing. So there's another protest. Military refuses to listen to him. They capture him and they kill him. And Romania is now also no longer controlled by Soviets or by the Russians. Germany, which by the way, Germany was maybe the richest country in Europe and most powerful before this moment. In Germany, they had, of course, been split in half, and Eastern Germany was controlled by the Russians. This guy became the head of the Communist Party in 1971. He used the secret police to maintain order. You can only imagine what the East Germans were thinking. I mean, they had just had Hitler as their leader, and then this guy moves in, and it's like, what's going on here, folks? Are we ever going to get out from underneath this terrible situation? And then on November 9th, 1989, that 1989 was the year, I was 14, the Berlin Wall came down. And it all, I'm telling you, it all happened at once. Like the gate was open, and then Czechoslovakia, and then the Germans were just kind of like so you guys just got your own freedom? Really? Like, you can do that? And they just showed up on the Berlin Wall and started climbing it. And no one did anything. And they said, oh, and they can call it, but it's 8 you can just climb the wall now. And they all climbed the wall, man. They tore it down brick from brick. It was a party that I hear nonstop for days. They partied in Germany as the friends and cousins in Berlin got together. And oh my gosh, freedom, freedom, free at last. Couldn't imagine. Um, This was the most symbolic moment of the end of the Cold War. In March of 1990, they had free elections. The Christian Democrats won. And quickly, West Germany pulled East Germany, wrapped their arms around them, and helped rebuild. Germany will be the quickest country in Eastern Europe to rebuild, followed by Czechoslovakia and Poland. And there's still a lot of poverty in Eastern Europe. I mentioned that there's a lot of immigration, guest laborers or people from Eastern Europe moving to Western Europe looking for jobs. And to this day, Eastern Europe, we're going to go back to that chart I showed you at the beginning. Eastern Europe is just not bounced back, just like other examples of imperialism. It takes a really long time for controlled, imperialized people to find their own way out. Now, one thing they did in Poland, it was really smart, was that they did a lottery system. So, like, who's gonna see? This is a big question. Who's gonna control the businesses that used to be controlled by the government? Now that the government no longer controls businesses, and well, each country had a kind of different answer, and how you answered really is going to help determine your fate. Do you let the rich party leaders, historical nobles, historically rich, do you let them just kind of take over all the businesses? Because if you do, then those countries, they didn't succeed at the same rate that the countries like Poland, who had a lottery, succeeded. So in Poland, they said, hey, we'll have a lottery, and if your name pops up, then we're going to allow you a chance to buy this government-owned business, previously government-owned business. But in some countries, and we're going to find out Russia, the rich oligarchs just took everything. And that's going to create an even worse living condition than under communism, because the rich now take everything, and the poor, who at least had enough money to barely survive, become incredibly, desperately poor in not just Russia, but a lot of these Eastern European countries that were once controlled by Russia, and they're still digging their way out of this mess. So the way that the recapitalization maybe of these countries went really would help influence how successful they'd be in the future. And the Baltic states, I do believe, are making their way back up. I believe that a lot of the countries are starting to make the turn, right? They're starting to be a little more successful again. But it takes a long time to dig your way out when you were controlled like that.